There is a strange irony nobody warns you about when you start becoming smarter. Before we continue, if this kind of reflection has ever caught you off guard, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps this reach more people who are also trying to make sense of the chaos. And now we can keep going. The promise always sounds great. Read more, study more, understand the world, and everything will finally make sense. You will gain clarity, control, maybe even peace. But the opposite usually happens. You spend years consuming books, podcasts, and deep documentaries, thinking you are unlocking some hidden level of existence. And in a way, you are. The problem is that the reward isn't wisdom. It's realizing the whole system is mostly improvisation. Congratulations, you just gained the ability to see reality without filters. And reality isn't elegant or profound. It feels more like a glitchy episode of Rick and Morty, inconsistent, chaotic, running without a clear objective. Rick Sanchez isn't just the smartest character in the show. He's what happens when someone understands too much. He looks at the universe like someone who opened the source code, only to discover nobody really knows how it works. There's no master plan waiting to be revealed, no hidden meaning behind the curtain. The universe isn't against you. What's worse is that it barely notices you exist. Ignorance works like a flattering photo filter. It allows someone like Jerry to wake up motivated, argue about sports as if it matters historically, compete with neighbors over status, and believe a motivational LinkedIn post actually changed something. Those small concerns are necessary, because if he stopped for 5 seconds to look at the bigger picture, the system would probably crash. Meanwhile, the person who understands too much starts seeing backstage. It's like going to a magic show and accidentally ending up behind the curtain. Suddenly you see how the trick works, how fragile the illusion is, how much depends on the audience wanting to believe, and that gets exhausting. It's like being at a party where everyone is completely absorbed in the vibe, while you notice the cracks in the walls and the DJ looping the same songs all night. You feel the urge to point it out, but nobody wants analysis. They just want the music to keep playing. When I was younger, I thought understanding politics, psychology, and economics would give me control over life. I thought knowledge meant advantage. Instead, it mostly made patterns impossible to ignore. A political speech stops looking inspiring and starts looking engineered. Perfect couple photos start looking like social validation strategies. Public debates feel scripted before they even begin. It doesn't feel empowering, it feels overwhelming, almost like Cassandra's curse. Seeing what's coming, warning people, and being labeled negative for noticing. Rick's burden was never knowing everything. It's realizing how many things people treat as sacred are just attempts to organize chaos. Work structures, social rules, status games, routines we follow without remembering who created them. Being intelligent doesn't mean seeing light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes it means realizing there may not be a tunnel at all. Just people walking forward pretending they know where they are going. You understand the performance isn't entirely real, yet you keep clapping anyway, because there isn't another theater to walk into. And maybe that's why Rick always looks tired, and maybe that's why the smarter you started feeling, the more exhausted you quietly became. Here's something people rarely admit out loud. There's a reason the Jerrys of the world seem happy, and it's not accidental. Drop the intellectual posture for a moment. Close the heavy book you are half reading at the cafe and admit it. On some level, there's envy there. Not envy of Jerry's life. Nobody dreams of being chronically incompetent inside their own family. The envy is quieter than that. It's about the silence inside his head. Jerry Smith is basically a monument to satisfied simplicity. While Rick's brain operates like a multiverse research lab processing infinite possibilities, Jerry's mind runs on something much simpler: basic validation, mild comfort, and very few existential questions. Give it reassurance, stability, and routine, and everything stays functional. And somehow, it works. While Rick spirals after realizing emotions can be reduced to chemistry and survival instincts, Jerry is genuinely concerned about whether the bakery made good bread that morning. The bread tastes good. The day feels good. That's enough. Ignorance isn't just comforting, it's protective. Big questions, mortality, cosmic insignificance, moral contradictions, don't penetrate his mental armor. They bounce off because they never fully enter. He doesn't avoid those thoughts, he simply never walks toward them. Meanwhile, the overthinking mind walks around emotionally unprotected. Every casual conversation exposed hidden insecurity. Every workplace interaction reveals subtle performance. Even buying groceries can trigger an internal ethical debate. Living like that feels like assembling a massive puzzle while the ground keeps shaking. And while you are struggling to fit the pieces together, Jerry is happily cheering on the puzzle glue. I once tried explaining absurdism, the idea of accepting life without inherent meaning, to someone who was clearly operating on Jerry energy. I talked about embracing uncertainty, about creating meaning despite the chaos. He listened carefully, thought for a moment, and said, "Couldn't the guy pushing the rock just use a tool?" He missed the entire point. Then he went home, slept peacefully, and woke up excited to wear a new shirt he had bought. End of story. He won that day. We laugh at Jerry to protect our own sense of intellectual identity, but there's a nervous edge to that laughter. It's the laugh of someone struggling in deep water while watching another person float effortlessly. Not because they mastered swimming, but because they never realized how deep the water is. Jerry doesn't need to discover life's ultimate purpose. His goal is simple. The TV works during the game and nobody changed the channel. And honestly, that's an achievable goal. Meanwhile, the person searching for ultimate meaning often ends the day mentally drained and unsatisfied. Deep down, every Rick would probably like, even briefly, to experience the mental quiet of being Jerry. To look at a blank wall and think, this could use a new coat of paint, instead of spiraling into thoughts about existence itself. Ignorance sometimes acts like a natural antidepressant that an analytical mind refuses to take, and realizing that doesn't bring relief. Now let me guess something about you. At school, you were the smart one, right? The kid who got good grades without trying too hard. The one who asked complicated questions. The one adults pointed at during family gatherings and said, "This one is going places." Doctor, scientist, engineer, something impressive was always waiting for you in the future. It sounded like praise, but it was closer to a life sentence. Because nobody explains this when you are young. Potential isn't a gift. It's an expectation delivered in advance. A debt you didn't agree to, but are somehow supposed to repay. Nobody ever told Jerry he had extraordinary potential. If Jerry manages to keep a stable job, that's already considered success. He's free. You aren't. Intelligence places you on a pedestal early in life. The problem is that the pedestal is tiny and very high. Mistakes don't feel normal anymore. They feel like wasted ability. Then you grow up. That promised extraordinary future turns into a normal job paying normal bills, and a quiet voice starts repeating in the background. Is this it? You? who read complex books too early. You who understood things faster than others. Now spending hours adjusting spreadsheets, answering emails, or sitting through meetings that could have been a short message. Welcome to the dictatorship of brilliance. You are not socially allowed to want a simple life. Saying you just want calm, stability, or enough peace to breathe makes people uncomfortable. With that brain, you should be doing more. And that's when paralysis begins. The expectations become so large that starting anything feels dangerous. A project has to be exceptional. A hobby must become mastery. A life decision has to justify all that early promise. If it isn't extraordinary, it feels like proof that something went wrong. So the safest option becomes doing nothing, because trying and being average hurts more than never trying at all. Mediocrity becomes terrifying, not because it's objectively bad, but because it feels like betrayal of the version of you everyone believed in. I spent years trapped in that mindset. Nothing could just be enjoyable. Movies had to be intellectually meaningful. Hobbies needed measurable improvement. Even rest had to feel productive. It was exhausting. A constant performance for an audience that didn't really exist. And Rick and Morty reflects this perfectly. Rick, with near godlike intelligence, finds no peace in understanding everything. The more he sees, the less stable meaning becomes. Destruction becomes easier than carrying the weight of awareness. Beth lives under a similar pressure, capable, intelligent, constantly measuring herself against expectations she never fully chose, always feeling both proud and insufficient at the same time. Being intelligent turns your life into an endless investment project. You become the investor, the product, and the employee simultaneously, and the unspoken goal is enormous: change the world. Anything less starts to feel like failure. Meanwhile, Jerry, who was never promised greatness, feels genuine pride after fixing a broken shower. And honestly, between the person at peace after solving a small problem and the genius who hates himself for not doing something monumental yet, who actually seems to be winning? The hardest part of thinking too much isn't facing existential thoughts before sleep. That part you can manage. What truly drains you is surviving everyday social interaction before you finally get home to think in peace. Small talk, casual conversations, that strange social waiting room where everyone discusses the weather as if it's meaningful. It's hot today, huh? And you nod politely while part of your brain wants to explain long-term patterns, environmental systems, and probabilities no one asked about. But you don't. You just say, yeah, it is. Being intelligent sometimes feels like living in a foreign country where you understand the language perfectly, but nobody wants to speak it. You make a layered joke and receive a blank stare. The same expression Jerry gives whenever Rick explains something remotely complex. You reference something deeper, silence fills the space, and you quickly translate it into something universally recognizable just to save the moment. And for a second, it feels like lowering your own volume just to fit the room. It's tiring. Like constantly bending down because the social ceiling is too low. Rick's sarcasm suddenly makes sense. It isn't just arrogance, it's protection. Cynicism becomes easier than repeatedly feeling misunderstood. He rarely connects as equal with anyone. People around him become roles instead of companions. Morty becomes emotional support, Beth becomes reflection, Jerry becomes observation, and that's intellectual isolation. You can be surrounded by people and still feel like the only one noticing something important. Like being at a crowded party while quietly realizing the building might be on fire, and everyone else is debating drink choices. At first, you try to warn people. Eventually, you stop and just watch. And sometimes the frustration deepens when clearly intelligent people fall for simplistic ideas anyway. Someone brilliant in one area believing things that collapse under basic scrutiny. That kind of loneliness carries irritation with it. You think, I thought at least you would see this. I've been in dinners, meetings, family gatherings where my body stayed present, nodding, laughing at the right moments, while my mind drifted elsewhere, analyzing patterns, noticing contradictions, or simply wishing I were home watching something quietly interesting. You start feeling like an anthropologist studying your own species, observing social rituals, subtle status competitions, flirting patterns, symbolic displays of success, all with a strange emotional distance. Eventually, one of two things happens. You end up alone, or you find a small group of equally tired people, and that's when an official club forms. The club of the mentally exhausted who understand each other immediately. You meet, talk for hours, share references effortlessly, and notice something strange. The conversations rarely celebrate life. They mostly analyze how absurd everything feels. It is a club, but it might be the only club where the main activity is quietly discussing existence while everyone already knows why they are tired. And that leads to a harder question. If understanding more only increases exhaustion, why does the mind keep searching anyway? Now think about something simple. You open a streaming platform to watch something. Just relax. Turn your brain off for a while. And that's where the problem starts. You are not going to watch just anything. You scroll carefully, check ratings, open reviews, look up the director, maybe watch multiple trailers, compare options. 45 minutes later, you are tired, slightly annoyed, and you end up rewatching a show you've already seen several times. Not because it was the best choice, because choosing became more exhausting than watching. Jerry's brain works in a simple loop. Once, chooses, moves on. Your brain works like an international ethics committee trying to decide where to eat lunch. Everyone presents complex arguments, nobody agrees, and eventually nothing happens. Now look at Morty. Morty doesn't overthink, he reacts. He feels fear and runs. He falls for someone and tries. Something explodes and he presses whatever button looks useful. And somehow, it often works. Many times in Rick and Morty, Morty's impulsive actions solve problems Rick spends too long analyzing. While the genius calculates endless consequences, Morty stumbles forward and accidentally fixes the situation because he isn't searching for the perfect decision, he's simply acting inside the moment. Rick, on the other hand, understands too much. Every decision branches into infinite outcomes. Pressing a button isn't just pressing a button. It's triggering chains of consequences across timelines and possibilities. So he hesitates. Living with a mind that never quiets down feels like this. You can't simply experience things. You are on a great date, but instead of enjoying it, your brain starts running compatibility analysis. Do our values align long term? What does this reaction imply emotionally? She left a little late. Was that discomfort or disinterest? And just like that, a human moment turns into an internal audit. There's an old philosophical thought experiment called Buridan's donkey. A donkey stands exactly between two identical piles of hay. Since both options are equally good, it cannot decide which one to eat and eventually starves. The overthinking mind often behaves the same way. Take the safe job that pays well or the meaningful one that feels uncertain. Move cities or stay comfortable. Start now, or wait for the perfect timing. You weigh outcomes endlessly until life makes the decision for you. Opportunities disappear while you are still analyzing. Jerry accepted the first job that offered free drinks on Fridays, and somehow he's functioning just fine. We like to believe overthinking is intellectual strength. Often, it's just wearing sophisticated language. Often, it's fear wearing sophisticated language. Fear of choosing wrong. Fear of wasting potential. Fear of living an imperfect version of life. But life isn't a math problem with a correct answer. It's messy and incomplete. And Morty, in all his chaotic impulsiveness, understands that instinctively. He jumps into the mess. The overthinker stays at the edge, imagining every possible version of what might happen. The real sadness of analysis paralysis isn't failure. It's the permanent what if. It's carrying the quiet grief of lives you never lived because your mind never stayed silent long enough to let you press the button. The first time you hear wubble-up-dub-dub in Rick and Morty, it sounds like nonsense. Just the chaotic catchphrase of a drunk scientist. Funny, random, easy to turn into a meme. Then Bird Person calmly explains what it means in his language. I am in great pain. Please help me. And suddenly the joke changes. Because that phrase captures something deeper. The emotional uniform many intelligent people end up wearing. Cynicism, irony, detachment, late-night nihilism disguised as humor. Not philosophy, but protection. After seeing too much, envying simplicity, feeling trapped by expectations, experiencing isolation, and freezing in front of choices, the mind builds armor. And the strongest armor is preemptive disappointment. If nothing matters, nothing can hurt you. If love is only chemistry, vulnerability becomes unnecessary. If work is meaningless, failure loses its sting. The cynical person usually isn't cold by nature. More often, it's someone who cared deeply and collided with reality too many times. Eventually, pretending not to care feels safer. Rick isn't enlightened. He isn't peacefully detached. He's someone who feels intensely and destroys things before risking loss. When he dismisses relationships, it doesn't come from superiority. It comes from fear of vulnerability. When someone turns sincere moments into sarcasm, it's often self-defense. Because sincerity requires risk, and risk requires courage. Cynicism is easy. Mocking is easy. Pointing out flaws require very little courage. Building something meaningful while knowing it might fail, that's difficult. Believing in something without guarantees, that's difficult. Allowing yourself to look naive because you still care, that's difficult. Jerry, despite his limitations, still believes in things. He commits, tries, holds on. It may look foolish, but he participates in life. Rick, despite his brilliance, often destroys what could matter, because losing something hurts more than never having it. And that's the final trap. Cynicism works. It protects you from pain. But like any heavy shield, it also prevents you from holding anything else. It protects you from rejection and from connection, from disappointment and from joy, from loss and from experience itself. You remain safely inside irony, watching others try, fail, love, and risk living fully, until one day you realize you've become a spectator of your own existence, a film critic who understands every technical detail, but forgot how it feels to watch the movie. Maybe wubble-up-dub-dub is exactly that. The sound a mind makes after building a perfect prison. A prison where you are the architect, the guard, and the prisoner at the same time. And every dark joke you tell is just a carefully disguised signal, hoping someone, somewhere, understands the translation.